I think would be precluded based upon my remembrance of the easement language. So we're trying to get a lot of that information together and figure out what the response back to Eagle is. I forget what was exactly in the packet in May, but I think it was a letter or an email or something from Eagle at the time. And so some of that information is still being shared with all of our consultants to make sure they have everything. The thought is to request the data from them. We'd like to know what they have, because the map that they have shows various locations where they have some type of either groundwater sample or test bore of some type. What they're looking for is vapor intrusion. And depending on where they find it, there's then a 100-foot concern limit. Well, the right of way is only 100 feet, so in theory, they could be across the street, they could be at Riverside, like you just mentioned, Zach, that business, they could be at the bank, depending where you draw the line. And so we're trying to figure out, what is the extent of what they're really looking for and why. So that was the extent of the meeting. First part of it was just information sharing, I think, really, and then but what council is going to see is a small proposal from ASTI to help represent us. They've done, apparently Eagle has done this in many other places with other facilities like this that are what do you call it, unclosed, not still open. So we're getting dragged into it because we're right away on both sides, and we have, we have a property that had TCE tested or found in 2012 to the south. And while we don't feel like we have liability exposure from that, there could be other responsibilities as well. So I'm trying to figure out what those are. Tim, did we forget anything? You were there too. Is that Marcus? You were online.
What's that?
You guys were online, did we?
In summer.
Okay.
Oh, Marcus, that's right.
So you're gonna council's gonna see a proposal from SGI, I think, unless it's under 5,000, right? In which case you can do that himself. But if it's over 5, we'll see it. But that's the nature of the next step, is to ask, I think, the Eagle folks to share their data and their reports on the project, because it's not clear when they found the TCE sample. Is that 2 years ago, or in the last 5 years, or 10 years? It's just not clear what they're chasing. So when that comes back, let's make sure we reshare the letter and stuff so that we can have all that together for like. Sorry, your report's still yours.
Nope, that's all I had. And I think we're gonna.
And we have questions for Justin? Jamie?
Just saying. I'm just seeing this now, and I think it's worth it. So the absentee voter applications are going out this week.
That's the plan for those who haven't already submitted one.
Okay.
Because when we sent out the ones for August, you had the opportunity to pick both August and November. And so there's going to be, a margin of folks who didn't submit for August, but is still on the permanent absentee voter list.
And when did the actual ballots go out? Do you know?
So I think our deadline to send them out is September 24th.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll get like a draft ballot probably in the first week and a half, or by week and a half to 2 weeks of September, and then we have to turn it around and let the county know that everything looks good. These look good to print, and then they'll get them delivered to us, and then we have a 45-day window prior to the election to send it out.
Any other questions for Justin? Good work. Thank you. Keep it up, please. I don't have a long report. I already covered, we already covered the common sale stuff that went on earlier this week in terms of reviewing the redevelopment agreement. That's in the packet, obviously, and then we subsequently just covered the meeting that we had this afternoon on the Eagle. So they asked us the plus that they have in front of us, or it's coming in front of us. I did get a call from David Lutton related to the property on Baker Road. And I haven't been able to confirm this with the South Township Supervisor, but apparently the South Township Supervisor does not have 3 people that want to meet, or that have a group that wants to meet with us on. And Mr. Lutton would still like to have some kind of communication. And he suggested that I meet with Mr. Hathaway, which I've already done over the phone prior to having Mr. Lutton appear in front of you. How does council feel about me having another conversation with property owner and or Supervisor Sile? Or would you prefer that if Sile doesn't have three people that are willing to meet with us, we just pass? That'll get your input. It doesn't appear to be a lot of interest on the Sile side of things at this point, and I'm not trying to create something necessarily if there's not interest there.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, it's not worth your time if they're not winning.
I mean, I think there's strength when there's a group,
Right.
but I'm not looking to be a reporter on it. So,
Yeah, I
I mean, the offer's still good for me. If we could meet as a team, I'm happy to do that, but I don't see any point doing it one-on-one unless you guys want.
So does he have two people that would meet?
There's one.
There's
He
one.
has himself right now. I haven't confirmed that with him. That's through Mr. Lutton.
Well, I will say that when I've had the chance these past couple of weeks to talk with school board members, like what's the most important thing the city could do? They said, we want houses there. We want as many houses there as can be allowed because Dexter Schools lost 200 students from 2019 to now. You do the math on how many that is per kid. And the school age population in the city dropped 200 from 2010 to 2020 census. And it's all about getting opportunities for more kids. So I think it is important. We don't want to be too pushy, but we ought to continue to consider it.
I'm happy to have the conversation if you're okay with it. It's different than what I had conceptualized earlier, and I didn't want to do anything about coming back to you, so. You want me to?
I think it's your call.
Okay. Okay. I'm comfortable with that. I'll continue to report bi-weekly on things. Sure. I still haven't been able to get back with the supervisor, so. That's all I have. I want to wish everybody an early happy Labor Day. I know it's a week or so away, but hard to believe that summer season is wrapping up. School season will be starting soon. We are down to the consent agenda. I need somebody to help us through this, please.
will move to approve the one item on the consent agenda, bills and payroll in the amount of $1,055,805.86.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Sam. Okay. Ms. Pam, please call a vote to approve the consent agenda. Michelle's will be abstaining.
Arad? Yes. Griffin? Yes. Hubbard?
Yes.
Keel?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Pay all the bills. There's no unfinished business, so we're down to new business item M1. Which is a request from the Dexter Senior Center for funding in an amount not to exceed $16,500 related to rendering services to the City of Dexter seniors.
I move we approve $16,500 to the Dexter Senior Center.
Moved by Ms. Ellis. Thank you, Zach. Is there a second? Second by Jamie. Any discussion necessary? Zach?
Just want to confirm that this is consistent with the budget that we adopted,
It is.
and it's consistent with what other communities are supporting based on population and participation, right?
Then I have to defer to Mr. Persons.
Did you hear the question, Jim?
Yes. It's actually based on 2019 figures. We haven't raised it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Pam, if you would please call the vote to approve.
Griffin? Yes. Arad? Yes. Michelle's?
Yes.
Hubbard? Yes. Keel?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item M2 is consideration of the proposal from OHM Advisors for a parks accessibility audit for an amount not to exceed $7,500. Is there someone that wishes to make a motion on this?
I'll move to approve the parks accessibility audit for not to exceed $7,500 with OHM Advisors.
Thank you. Motion by Griffin. Thank you, Jim.
I second.
By Shannon. Thank you.
So a couple meetings ago, so this was brought up as a concept. A few years ago, we had the MMRMA come through and do basically a liability audit, which, you know, they're looking for potential trip hazards and that sort of thing. They weren't necessarily looking for, you know, how do we make our parks more accessible, you know, closer to universal design. And that's what this evaluation would look to do. And speaking with Pat, I mostly communicated with Patrick, but I know it's also why Marcus is here. They have some folks on staff who specialize in parks. And so they feel that this is something that they have the capacity to do.
Great. Council, have any questions? Wow.
I'd like some clarification on what inventory actually entails. I feel like, I mean, I don't know what that means, but it seems like 4 weeks is a lot of time to be spent on that. Could we?
Marcus, say that.
Just an inventory of all the features that are at the park, the walk, the pathways. If there's any areas that have challenges with slopes or trip hazards or anything like that, that would be part of that analysis or data gathering. So yeah, it wouldn't be 4 straight weeks of work. I think we're asking for, once we're authorized, you know, we have other projects too, that over that first 4 weeks we complete. The Niner Kelly, who just CC'd on the proposal, I don't know that anybody here has had a chance to meet her, but she's the principal in our planning group, actually has years of experience with current Metro Park Authority, where she worked, and was a private planning firm before that. So she knows what she's looking at, and frankly, I'm not the expert on it. So if there are questions, I can follow up with an email or anything. If anybody has some specific, any other specific questions about what exactly she'd be doing with that inventory, I'd be happy to follow up with Justin a little more.
So my take on it was that they're gonna take each park and describe what's in it, from whether it's a playground, a bench, swing set, pathway, and then describe, you know, is it accessible? Kind of a,
Yeah, so like with benches,
including the entrances.
does it have a back? Does it have apparently having armrests
Is there anything ground up to it?
Sure, that just seemed like a long time and a lot of money to spend on something that you just described that we already partially have, do we not?
we
Or
do
can
not.
those two things not be, I mean, what
So
is it?
the liability audit was more like, is it, you know, do we have like a,
Swing set too close to the river.
yeah, or like, is there not wood chips under the swing set? So if somebody falls, they're gonna. bust
So there's
their
nothing
head.
that's usable out of that report.
So I mean, we'll probably share that report with OHM, but they weren't looking for the same things.
I have a question. You mentioned the slopes and such, but under the clarification and assumptions, it says that that is not part of it. Page 78 on our packet, under clarifications and assumptions, first bullet point, does a detailed evaluation of barrier-free access to park.
Yeah, so that's just referred to, they're not doing like a topographic survey, but anything that is visually identified as about compliant will be looked at.
Thank you.
Pretty obvious. I mean, you can get, you know, ADA is finicky, but oftentimes there's things that are obviously not compliant, so any of those will be noted. Just clarifying that we're not doing a full survey of each part.
Zach?
I know it doesn't get a lot of use now, but should Second Street Park or Horseshoe Park be included in this?
Yeah, it's First Street Park.
Okay, my apologies, I'm still getting used to my new glasses, I can't read so much. Was this project is not budgeted, correct?
It was not specifically included in the street budget.
We got contingency in the parks budget to cover it?
It depends on whether or not we can get to a project for, or if we, well, I think we probably do. A lot of it's gonna depend on the bid price for the Granite Street connector.
I believe our organizational chart, I forget the fancy term, says that Smith Group JJM is our parks consultant. Did we consult them to say, hey, we're looking at this thing for our parks?
I did reach out to them, and they said that it wasn't something that they had someone on staff with expertise in.
One of the things that I've seen a lot of more recently, and I don't see it in here, I'm looking at my eyes and my glasses, doesn't mention accessibility to water, such as the fancy kayak launches or just being able to get to the water. Is that something that can be included in this?
It does say fishing facilities. I took that as thinking about the river, but maybe I'm wrong.
That's the pier where folks,
Could be.
not where you actually launch or recover. Is that something that could be included?
Yes.
I'm good, thanks.
Wow,
Can I just ask one follow-up question, Marcus?
sure.
So I looked up on the rate sheet for the principal. So is this 4 weeks for $6,200? Is that essentially 29 hours at $215 an hour? Is that what you're saying would be doing all that work? I'm just trying to figure out where that, I mean, it's more than I expected this to cost. So I'm just trying to figure out why.
Yeah, it would be a combination of the principal overseeing the project, but she wouldn't necessarily be doing all of the inventory herself.
Okay.
Be using one cheaper, so, we have a combination of the oversight and back planner assessment.
So it'd be more than 29 hours then.
Yes.
Other questions?
I just have a comment. I think something like this will be very useful for us and the parks for planning of the future to determine what is needed for our parks to make it easier for a segment of our population. That would really gives us opportunity to make a difference for their quality of life in our cities and parks.
I agree. Zach?
Of another question. This is a bit bizarre twist. So my understanding has always been that for parks, when you do the audit of, you've got the giant slide that's going to kill all the children, that for liability purposes, you want to know all of the trouble things. Yeah, that you need to know that if someone gets hurt and you didn't know you had the giant killer slide for some reason. you didn't. But when you have that inventory of these are the problem things, you don't necessarily have to replace them. It's just that when that slide reaches the end of its life, we know it's trouble. We're not going to put another giant 30-foot steel slide out in the sun. If we identify these issues, like there's no proper ADA access at some point, are we obliged to fix it in a certain amount of time, or do we face consequences?
I think that'd be a good question for our attorney and our insurance folks, but it probably depends on the severity and the potential for immediate imminent harm. So.
Because there's I'm thinking of the sidewalks and roads.
Yeah.
If you knew there was a problem and you didn't fix it, then you're liable. Whereas if just the pothole buttons up and you didn't know it, then
I think our goal is to fix anything that makes it difficult for somebody that can't get to use the park, and wants to use the park. So I mean, I think the expectation off of this would be that most of the key recommendations, if not all, would be something that we would prioritize over a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
And a lot of our park work has been done recently, so there's gonna be some things that'll be very small, so be interesting to find out what the biggest thing is, but.
And I raise it just because if they find a bunch of stuff and, oh my gosh, we have to spend $20,000 in the next 2 years to fix these things, that's a little bit different than if we can.
But since we're considering, upgrades at Mill Creek Park North, might as well find out what we're deficient in now, so that when we do it, we're, correcting those.
So, I'm not an attorney or insurance company, but, one thing that, in my role, I have, dealt with, the circumstances of classrooms and facilities that, go through regular ADA reviews and such. So there are things that, yes, as Justin said, there is the degree of severity, and then there is the degree of quality of life. So if there are things that I identify as dangerous and need to be changed immediately, it is in our best interest to do it, because even if something happens and we don't know it, it still has some liability issues for us. But generally with things that are more towards the quality of life, ADA guidelines are that identify them, and as you replace them or rebuild and such, then address those issues.
It's kind of 1,600 a liability.
I'm not gonna answer that.
I have a lot of friends who say it is for other reasons.
Okay, other questions? Other questions on the proposal or for Justin? Pam, please call the vote to approve.
Sean?
Yes?
I'm
Oh,
sorry. That's okay. I just wanted to draw everybody's attention. If you notice on the on page 79 of the packet, the CC is Nina Kelly. Some of you on council may remember Nina, and I apologize if this got brought up. I didn't hear it. Nina was formerly the Chief of Planning and Development for the Huron-Clinton Metro Park Authority. Nina was the director at the time that the original Mill Creek Outdoor Adventure Center was coming through, and they went through a whole new planning process when we brought up our concerns regarding what was being proposed at the time to the Huron-Clinton Metro Park. She works very well and is very highly regarded with her area of expertise, which is park planning.
Thank you,
That's all I
Michelle.
wanted to say.
No problem. Thank you for adding that. Ms. Pam, please call the vote.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes,
Arab,
Yes.
Keel,
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item M3 is a consideration of the proposal for 3 years of audit services with PSLZ, PLLC. Is there a motion
I
to
move to
approve?
approve that 3-year proposal with 2-year optional extension period.
Thank you. Motion by Griffin.
No second.
Second by Watt. Thank you. Any questions on proposal?
Oh, I just want to make one comment.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to charge the DDA, I guess. There was that note about sharing costs with the DDA.
Yeah, the DDA is more than happy to cover it, so. Anything to add, Justin? Or all good?
No, I think it was also mentioned in there that, with Marie, potentially retiring in a couple of years, that having PSLZ continue on as our auditor after her retirement to help whoever replaces her kind of get their bearings would be much appreciated.
Ms. Pam, please call the vote to approve.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Arab, yes, Griffin,
Yes.
Michelle,
yes,
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. New business item M4, consideration of a proposal from F&V for engineering services related to the relocation of the variable frequency drives at the wastewater treatment plant for an amount not to exceed $6,400.
To approve the proposal.
Moved by Griffin, thank you, Jamie.
I'll second.
Second by Watt, thank you, Watt. Any questions, or Justin, you want to go into it a little bit?
Yeah, and I would let Tim go into more detail, but
Okay.
this was a budgeted project. And it's, the goal is to relocate them due to hazardous conditions. Basically, it's a corrosive environment, and getting them out of there will extend their life cycle. So the VFDs are not cheap to replace. So yeah, at least we can get these ones out and keep them going.
Yeah, we had a VFD go down, and that's obviously when we sent it in to get overhauled, we were told that it couldn't be overhauled because the corrosion was so bad, so we want to take it out of that corrosive environment, put it into a more dry, stable environment that we shouldn't have to worry about that in the future.
Zach?
Is this the ones inside the building or the ones that replace the Archimedes screw?
No, they're ones for the tertiary filters, so they're inside the building.
Okay, back where the big sand that you study.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's the waterfall, yeah, so the mist off there, because the ferric is obviously corrosive, and we tried to tame it down by putting some visqueen and stuff around it, which we've done really well in, but obviously with this drive going down and then telling us basically what we thought, this would be the better way, just to give them a different room, not to worry about this, because these life cycles should last 10 to 15 years, and we've gotten 3, so we don't want to keep going through that every 2 years.
I was gonna ask, these are with the life cycle, and we've only had 3 years, and F&B designed the system and put them there. I think they ought to meet us part way on this. They're partly responsible for designing it.
Well, there's some other things that play a factor too. I mean, we got an atmosphere that's not getting moved like it should. That was, couldn't afford at the time to get that done, because the price I want to say was $125,000. And at the time when we were doing the project, we didn't have those funds. So, and that's something Justin and I have discussed about, putting money aside and maybe a few years, 5, 6 years from now, getting that done and taken care of. Hopefully it's still in that range, the way things go. But this is a start.
Other questions for either Justin or Tim? Okay, Pam, please call the vote to approve.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Arab,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Keel.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. New business item M5, consideration of a proposal from Partners in Architecture for design services. This was included in the supplement, I believe.
Yeah, the actual proposal.
You haven't had a chance to stop by, guys, for that.
Yeah.
Everybody have a chance to see it? Okay, is there someone who would like to make a motion? So now you had asked that this had to be on the agenda, so I'll let you.
Yeah, to move the discussion, I move to approve the proposal from Partners in Architecture for design services for as presented in the supplemental for amount not to exceed 42,500.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Sanal, second by Griffin. Thank you very much. Okay, discussion.
Thank you. So in our previous meeting, council meeting, we came together 5-1 to approve a ballot language for maximum of 2 mills and for 8.4 million to pay for the future of fire station. So in that meeting, we discussed and agreed on 2 very main components. One is the most critical issue was the funding, and that we agreed that we don't need as extensive of a structure to provide for the safety and health of our firefighters and also to provide service to the community. So with that ballot language now approved and sent for processing, I had a chance to talk with a couple of council members, Ms. Griffin and Ms. Hubbard, and talked about continuing the conversation and see what are potentially the next steps that we can do from now until November to just have this conversation moving forward. And on that night of the last meeting, we only had consensus to talk about the funding. We did not have consensus to move the conversation forward in other areas or explore other things. But you know, as I said, the most critical thing was the funding. So having that on the ballot is great. It gives us, if our community supports it, it gives us room for a variety of options and discussions. And on that, I reached out to Justin and asked to see if we can put this agenda item to ask Partners in Architecture to maybe provide us with plans that show, based on the 8.4 million that we are putting on the ballot, as well as the $1 million that we have committed to put from the city, so 9.4. What would be the suggested options, whether it is in the current location, renovation in the current location, or building a new station in Merrill. So with that, they send this supplemental that we received today. I have a few questions.
Go ahead. The floor is yours.
So,
Yours, Leah, your item.
Thank you. Justin, the previous time, this is my brain not cooperating. The previous time that we asked Partners in Architecture to modify the or give us a more detailed plan for the Main Street, did we receive any of how much it would cost us?
We did not. And so to date, and Jamie actually asked this question and responded in the supplement, that we actually haven't paid anything to our Partners in Architecture for the last 2 years regarding fire. They haven't invoiced us and we haven't paid them anything.
Did they give us estimate of how much that would cost like this one?
They did not, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get this.
Yeah.
Is to start that cost paper trail.
Okay. So I have to say that the cost was, now it makes more sense since I didn't see any other numbers. It was like shocking to see this number, but potentially that could be in line of what other designs they have done for us so far. Thank you.
It is very possible that part of this is catch up.
Otherwise, no, that's what I.
What?
I would like to know that before we move forward, because I mean, I want to know what we're paying for.
Mhm.
This is catch up, or if this is just this. But with that said, what I was sort of thinking over the last couple of weeks was less along the lines of this, because I feel like we already have this essentially with the last thing they came through and shaved things down. That's how we came to that number of 9.4, I thought through. And maybe we didn't sort of explicitly say that out loud, but you can look at the things that they've sent to us already and pull certain line items off and exchange things and get to this number. What I would rather see is getting to a number smaller than this, because I feel like, yes, we're asking for the max with contingencies, but I would just like to see what we can do for less, because if we, you know, I mean, even if we get this approved, it doesn't mean we have to spend that much. So I just want to see what our options are. So if we're gonna spend more money, I'd rather see that than something I feel like we've already seen.
Well, relative to all good thoughts, but I think we want to take some action to authorize at least owner team meetings or something, because there's 3 weeks between now and the next meeting. We don't authorize them and they're needing whatever they say in here, 6 to 8 or 8 weeks, 10 weeks. You know, we don't want to lose the 3 weeks. I mean, time is, I think, as important as direction here. And, you know, the goal, I think, is to show them that there's a significant facility that can be designed for the amount of money that we're asking the residents to support. And it might be slightly different than the picture that's out there at the corner of Meadowview and Dexter Ann Arbor Road. So to me, the important part is getting those options in print so that we can show people what the options are. So I mean, I think this could be refined, or maybe we come up with some language that we want to tweak the scope or whatever based upon the owner, the initial owner, team meeting, architect. You know, you're welcome to attend that meeting if you want and express your interest to David, but I think we need to get something started if we're going to do this. And I like the direction of this. I think it's valuable. I'm glad you guys talked about it in a little bit, and I appreciate this being on the agenda. I just think time is key, though. So I don't want to, I'd rather not postpone this to whatever September meeting, 13th, or whatever that date is, just because we lose 3 weeks out of our window.
Another thing I appreciate that, Sean, thank you, was that I had a chance to attend Dexter Forum this past weekend and also talk with others in the neighborhood. And one of the, basically what you said, the importance of it was very evident from the conversations that the main question was, so what are the options? What are the plans and things like that? So I think having something, I'm also interested in adding some language to maybe change the scope and such for helping with that amount. But I also think that it will show our due diligence of doing the work for what we are asking.
Yeah, I think Waz right in that we have enough figures. Sure. We have enough preliminary figures based upon the drawings that are, you know, at matching what's on the picture out there, that convinced 5 of us that we could do something less and still have a substantial facility that would serve the community for years. So we need to get to what those ultimate pictures are so that people can see them. And there's going to be one at one location and one at the other, and ultimately we'll choose which one that is. But I agree, you could just do it by math, but that doesn't get us to a picture that I think that's the picture isn't worth 1,000 words, right? And that's what we need to. I mean, I think we should authorize the process. You know, you could authorize up to half of it if you want, or something, if you pick a number to initiate the goal, so that that can be communicated. And it can be brought back, you know, in September to finalize the final amount based upon that discussion if you want. But I think we need to take some step tonight.
Could we put parameters, like the two points that we discussed last time? One was the number of bays that could reduce amount, that if we go from the proposed 5 bays to 3 double bays, that could reduce about 1,100,000, and the other one was the training room that was about 700. So could we ask for modification on the drawings versus this full process that would show what it means if those items are taken out?
I think that could be the basis of the initial conversation. And then you want to have the fire chief and whoever else from the fire department, if they want to play along with that as part of the owner team. Jim?
Yeah, so I have a question. Yeah, so the 10 weeks brings us to October 31st. So I guess there could be people, some people voting absentee before the 10 weeks, just with the reality. And then in point one, so this is in the supplement, they talk about the programming phase. They're saying 2 work sessions over a period of 2 weeks. And then in planning, that's going to take 4 weeks and 2 user group work sessions. And then on the next page under review, they see meeting with admin and council at 2 points in the process. So I just want to get a sense of like who is meeting and when, because I am not like, I don't know that I don't get the sense initially council needs to be having work sessions. Like I would be happy to defer to fire chief and I guess whoever was involved with the initial conversations for the design, so the fire chief meeting with David Gasson, to come up to something, and I guess then bringing it back to us if they feel like they need some input because they're at some key decision point. So I guess, yeah, I wasn't quite sure who they were intending to be meeting for these. So they specify work session, but then user group work session, and then later council.
Yeah,
So-
I think he's basically asking us to define who we want in that user group. I mean,
So even for that point one, that would be that.
the very
same
first
group.
one, I think he's basically saying he'll meet with whoever we put in front of them.
Oh,
Okay,
right,
is how I'm,
And select representatives.
yeah, is how I'm anticipating that. So, you know, I think it should be obviously Justin representing staff. If he feels he needs to bring anybody else from staff, you know, that makes sense to me.
Right.
We should invite Doug Armstrong to participate.
Yeah.
You know, if the council wants to have a representative, we can do that, but otherwise, you know, I think if he can have that meeting in the first 3 weeks to convey, you know, Waz's comment about wanting to see, you know, he can get this less, because that's an important message. So now he wants to get to the 2 options. You know, we previously talked about less bays and smaller training facility. You know, those are the primary angles. I think the concept that maybe the sheriff doesn't go down on all the way there and we renovate back at, you know, if you build a fire station over there and renovate it at 8140, those are the different combinations that I think we're looking to see, to understand, right?
How did, in terms of council member representation and the user group, how did that work in the past? Was there such a group?
Very little to zero.
Yeah, so I think probably the closest is the 3515 user group, which Mary Theo participated in, on and off. But
Thanks. One meeting.
So are we looking for that in this case, or are we not? to that? I'm not necessarily inclined, I'm just trying to figure out how we got to where we got to the last.
I guess the question, Justin, do you feel comfortable representing, you know, the group, the 7 of us, in terms of that goal?
If the goal is to continue on with kind of 2 concepts, one for each location, then I think we can get to that. If like at the end, the goal is like, I don't want to get to the end and have folks say, well, we wanted, you know, 1 concept for 1 location. But as long as it's bring back 2 concepts, 1 for each location, then I think we can get there.
So that there could be a hybrid, though, right?
Eventually.
I mean, it might,
Mhm.
that's the flexibility of this, right? I mean, we don't, but I think that's the strength of it also. And we have the flexibility to put an improved facility either at 8140, or we can build one at MAV, right? But if the dollars from the concept show that what we're building at MAV hits the number, then we would probably keep sheriff at 8140, at least for the time being, right? Is that what we're thinking?
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe there's like an option 1, which is.
Yeah, the 1A.
And 1A.
Right, that's what I'm saying, it's really more than 2, I mean, there's
Right.
there's 2
Yeah.
locations, but there's a hybrid version.
Right.
Zach?
Just a quick caution on multiple facilities. I think that may have been, that the ability to use a bond for multiple facilities may have been closed because the bond language says facility in singular, not plural. So if you want to be able to spend bond money in multiple places, you may want to check to see with the clerk if you can revise it and resend that with the Washington County clerk.
I think that meets the intent of what we discussed, but
Plain language.
Even with that, are we really even looking at doing any work on the sheriff's substation if we leave it there? So that's still one facility. We're looking at like an option 1A, where we leave the sheriff there. and build new, that's still one facility, right? And that's, I mean, that's,
I was just playing off what the last several discussions have been.
yeah, and I just wanted to make sure that that was still in play with what he was saying.
So there's an option where you don't, you just leave it as is.
Yeah.
And then there's maybe an option where you renovate it where it is.
Well, that was gonna be my question is, again, I think David can design to what our intent is. So if our goal is to renovate 8144 Sheriff, I think that just needs to be made clear to David. So if we're, I think we just need to make sure that we're all on the same page of we're potentially asking him for 3 options.
Again, he stood in front of us and said that he could design to a number.
Mhm.
So he needs to take the input from the fire department, what we've talked about as a body here, and back in the number and tell us where we're at.
Mhm.
That's the intent of these 2 things. And if he gets, I think what Lod's saying is if you can get to the same spot for less, we'd like to know that if it's. I mean, we're not that different from where we were with what I'm gonna call the extreme options. I mean, they were roughly between 10.4 and 11 million. And we're saying, go at it from a 9.4. And that may not even be the total that we're allowed to save over the 20 years that we would do this. I mean, that's the million we have initially. But I think the point of this is, what is it that has to be scaled back? And our current interim fire chief, Doug Armstrong, said if he could have 3 double bays, so the equivalent of 6 spaces, he was happy on bay size, which is an increase up from the 4 that we have. And as long as other facilities like this for training could be available, he doesn't need training at the same location as the station. That's what I heard. So I think that's what should be given to David and as the starting point. Zach, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's difficult for me to have, I think right now, a clear opinion on, if we're doing, what we're doing with the sheriff's substation, if we're gonna leave it as is, if we're gonna renovate, because I don't think that we've ever seen one mock-up of like just the sheriff's substation, and I personally have never even actually walked in the sheriff's substation, and so much of our conversation is focused on the fire. We've heard from the fire chief, former and current, and so
It's
it's
by
not
far
new
the
to me.
primary. The primary facility we're talking about is the fire station. The sheriff got drawn into should it follow or stay or, right? I mean, but the intent, I think, of our discussion was if there was a way to build a facility that met our needs on the fire side, and there were dollars left over, there were things at the sheriff's station that we thought we could improve too. Whether we choose to do them or not is a different decision point. But I think if I understand what you're saying, is people are like asking, how would you use the 8.4 or in this case, the 9?
Yeah.
Zach?
Okay. A couple of comments, observations for the service deliverable 1 programming. The best practice that I heard over and over and over from folks who've done this, from folks who just do this for their living, from folks who've done this, is that your working group needs to include 1 to 2 firefighters, not just the chief. The chief isn't generally working in the building, cleaning the hoses, cooling the air packs, that type of thing throughout the day. It ought to include at least 1 DPW representative because it's going to be a city facility that we're responsible for the maintenance of, and so we want to have that covered. And you ought to have at least 1 member of the legislative body because it's a lot of policy that goes into it. So just delegating that to staff is generally been relayed to me is not relatable. And we had a previous city manager who actually at the front table said, I don't want that thing. So it should be the decision makers should be at the table. For planning, I question I want to know, or would like to know, or at least throw out there that this doesn't appear to know what level of design work. Is it gonna be a 25% plan, a 50% plan, a 75% plan? And I raise that because the plans we've got so far, and this pops in my mind, and obviously is for the proposal at the current station didn't include a lot of spaces that are important to have. And if it's just a bubble diagram, that's not really useful. You need to know where you're going to put store your medical equipment that has to be clean and secure. Where are you going to put your 3 foot by 6 foot compressor to fill the things that they breathe from? We also haven't decided if we're doing design bid build or construction manager at risk or some variation on that. This presumes we're doing design bid build, just kind of the structure that we're gonna design the thing and have a rough cost. That's very common, but it's also the most expensive way and the least effective to build to a budget. If we do construction manager at risk, we have the architect and the builder, and we say, here's what we want, figure out how to do it. We use that same approach when we did the sewer treatment plant upgrades, and they came up with a lot of changes, such as having tip up concrete walls instead of brick or in situ masonry. For engineering, I will point out that I believe we actually do have a detailed site survey. So this information that Mr. Gadsden, Partners in Architecture, has passed to us is not fully correct. I believe we've even done some geotechnical investigations that actually shows where the spot is. And the engineering, depending on the model of where the structure goes, it will greatly affect the cost. If it's steel, if we design for steel and can't get steel, or steel is really expensive, instead of going with masonry or something else, that will have a wild fluctuation, so it won't be a really useful planning tool. Our architect does design fire stations, but he also designs libraries and schools. As a summer camp founder and as a volunteer fire department. I bring that up not to say he's not a good guy, but he doesn't have experience in the nuts and bolts of designing these things or designing the standard operating procedures that are involved and entailed with how you change things. So it would be if I had a magic wand, I would also have us get a consultant in here who only does fire stations. It's the model that Webster Township used. It doesn't cost you more because they don't double the work. They both do certain things. And I will use the example for Dexter Township. The architect who built that, they do fire stations and other things. Time, but he didn't have experience building, so he allowed them to build things that were very costly mistakes. Kind of the big picture thing is we can have the best plan here, but know that there's 0 ways that this council can oblige the next council to do that. That barn left the toothpaste tube when we didn't put any specifics in the language. The only specific is it has to be for a public safety facility. We can't bind them by resolution, by ordinance, by any of that stuff. The only thing that could bind the decision would be a charter amendment. And I'll just say that I appreciate the interest for finding value. I'm going to go back to the example of our sewer treatment plant. We cut out $125,000 basically on an air moving unit. And that cut the lifetime of one of the expensive pieces of equipment from 10 years to 3 years. So there is opportunity cost for going cheap now. And I will be quiet for the rest of the meeting on this. Thank you.
So,
Thank you. So a couple of things that Mr. Mitchell brought up that I would like to address. If in the programming, somebody from this body needs to be there I'll be more than happy if the council chooses to participate in that group. In terms of planning and engineering, the points you mentioned in terms of the various little spaces mentioned and things like that, they were not in the previous plans that were given to us. And Mr. Mitchell provided a proposal last time to move forward, not only with the funding for almost 3 mills, but also for a location specific based on those plans that did not have these things that he's now saying that this should have. So it's very interesting that at that time didn't seem to be an issue, and it is right now.
The Meadowview site did have all those spaces in it.
So what we are, I think, requesting is that we do modifications to the 2 plans that were provided, so we can have this discussion based on the items that we think potentially can still help provide the life and safety for our firefighters, but also help with and the service, but also help with what we are putting in front of our citizens. And yes, we are not able to oblige the next council to do anything about it. It actually is this council, in my opinion, responsibility to have this conversation and not just drop it and say, okay, we put the ballot in front of people. It's up to the next council to have this conversation. It just shows that we are continuing the process, and we will hand it off to the next council when the time comes. But at least it's our due diligence to our residents.
Okay, so. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, real quick.
Yeah,
Just to kind of go back to kind of the timing of everything. I just want to remind council that we basically have two meetings before the ballots go out. And so I would imagine that ballots will start coming back very shortly after they go out. Just something to be aware of that as we start to think through kind of what we want to
so 2 meetings, including this one, or 2 meetings after this one?
after this.
Okay, so I think what we should ask David is to find a way to do this by the end of September. Can you put that on him, and if it is do a little overtime or costs a little more, or we find out what that number is. I think we should try to have him finished before the end of September. Okay, and I think that I don't have any problem with the suggestions of more firefighters along with the chief. We tried that last time, and the previous chief just wouldn't allow anybody else's input other than his own. So I'm sure Doug will be responsive or receptive to that. If there's a member of DPW that should attend, I trust that you can work out who that should be. So now I appreciate you volunteering. If everybody's comfortable with that, I'm happy with that as a legislative representative. But I think we should push for 6 weeks. I think we should authorize up to some amount to let this get started, and then we can see this again on the 13th to finish the direction. So he has a chance to get feedback. But I mean, what everybody said, all of this bodies, all of that stuff together creates a lot of strength in this. I mean, we're going to have a fantastic facility. And when we get to the design level, whatever design process that is, whether it's construction management at risk, or we're working in that process, or whether it's the traditional design bid build, we're going to refine it to understand the details of where things sit within the facility at A or B. Okay, the message here is that we have solid options, and we want to show people what those look like a little more clearly than just one picture on the post that isn't really our target anymore. I mean, it's the only thing people have seen for the last few years, or a couple of years, whatever it's been, it went up. And so the goal is to change that misconception, say it's not this, this is the illustration. I mean, most people what we've done over the last 10 years, and, you know, I've read things and heard people talk about this has been going on for, 23 years or some number back to, that may be that there was a topic on it, but the heart and soul of this has been over the last decade, this conversation. And if there's one thing we've shown our residents, it's that the current facility needs to be modernized by today's standards. Now, whether we do that there or we build new, we're gonna get to a modern facility. We're gonna get there, but we don't know what the community will support. That's why we asked the question that way, right? We spent the last several meetings talking about that, and cost was the primary concern of the majority of this body. So I think, Justin, what we need you to do is talk to David, okay? And he needs to get the revised proposal back to us prior to the packet going out too. Okay, we can't get these on Monday. Okay, I appreciate that he got it to us, but we can't get them on Monday. It's gotta be on Wednesday prior to the next council meeting with whatever the refinement is. I would recommend we authorize up to something like, $10,000 or 12, or you guys pick a number, to get the process started talking about the user group. So that the meeting with the fire department, and the chief, and firefighters, and so on, whoever it is, can get scheduled and can react. Wow.
So you're saying that we wouldn't be looking at any plans until after the absentee ballots would go out though, right? On this timeline we're talking about right now, because just like, how I started this conversation, now that we're actually talking about number of meetings and the dates and this and that, like, I think it's incredibly important for us to have an informational piece out to the public before those ballots hit, so that they know that.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, but then what is it, how are we gonna do that if, I guess I'm confused by what you mean, that you want them to have this back at the end of September?
Well, so why? They want, the architect wants to meet with the fire department, right? And he's gonna prepare a 2D drawing. It's a site plan with rooms, like we've seen multiple times, right?
Yeah.
Then down here under the 3D, he's gonna convert it to a picture, a graphic. He's gonna convert it to a graphic, so it looks more like what's on the sign. Those are the three primary steps in this. So all I'm suggesting is we don't waste the next 3 weeks and allow them to get started on that.
No, I agree. I just want to make sure that we have what we need prior to the 22nd when the ballots go out. To put.
That's the only question we can't answer tonight.
Because I think we need to be able to have a plan. We have to have a plan. Some sort of plan.
Yeah, so I would ask him to see if we can get that and get the package back by September 21st, so that way you can see it at your meeting on the 26th.
Is that the second meeting of September?
That's the second meeting.
Does that make sense to me? I mean, what we're asking is for a smaller version of the plan we already have. I mean, we have a plan that is 11 million. What we're trying to do is show it to us at 9.4.
And I get all that, but we sit here and we've looked at all these things, and I'm just concerned about ballots going out on the 22nd, and people don't know any of that. So in a perfect world, we'd have like a one-pager back, front and back, that had some basic information of the plans we're working on and what we would be doing with this money we're asking them to give to us
We can do that also.
before the 22nd though.
So
I heard the 26th. What date is the second meeting?
the second meeting is the 26th.
Okay, and ballots go out on what?
Ballots go out, are required to go out 45 days prior to the election, which I wanted to say was the 24th, and the 24th is a Saturday.
It's essentially the same.
It's right around the same time.
Right around the same week. Okay, well, that's why it's important, I think, that this process concludes by that time.
Do you want to see something for
I think,
a public ad piece for the next meeting?
yeah, I think you should draft a public ad piece based upon the conversations with David. And I think that what we should shoot for is he should shoot to have the meetings with the owners and the conceptual floor plans back to us by the next meeting. So that we're halfway there at that point in time, so people can start seeing what the concept looks like, then you can tweak it and convert to the 3D by the second meeting. And if it takes a revised proposal to get there, that's what we need back from them. But we want them to get started. I'm suggesting this, I don't make the motion, but I'm suggesting, we want to authorize enough to have them proceed down that path. So the next meeting, we're seeing what those floor plans look like for each one of the two options, so to speak. Yes,
The Green, I think it was Green Oak Township, their informational packet was included in our last packet. I think that could be maybe a place to start.
it's a good sample, right? Good sample.
I did a day calculator and I also get September 24th, that's 45 days prior to delivery.
Okay, well, there we go. That's a Saturday?
It's a Saturday, which means we would probably try to get them out on that Friday.
Okay.
We would try to get them in.
Good. Well, let's have a draft of the,
The 22nd earlier.
let's have a draft of the public
That's why I can
information
say.
piece for next meeting, so that we can get that publicized.
So do you guys want to accept a friendly to change the dollar amount, or do you guys want to move on? I think, are you want to?
Friendly.
Either way, how do we get there?
I
Yeah.
think it was you, Jamie.
Yeah.
I-
She said-
No,
Sanam-
she
Sanam-
made the motion, you're the second.
Sanam made it, Griffin seconded it.
Yeah.
What do you guys want to do, 20,000?
20,000. I thought it was 20,000.
Meet them halfway?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a motion to authorize Partners Architecture to start on the initial phases of the programming and planning for not to exceed 20,000. Have that brought back by the first meeting in September, along with an updated proposal to complete the 3D imaging with that. And you'll find the survey and the geotechnical work that was done previously, because I agree that was done. Okay, to follow the vote? Oh, Zach?
Quick, so we're ultimately voting to spend up to $42,500 for revised plans that we've currently got, but they've already got an estimate for things that we can maybe come close to cutting. That we can't guarantee that we're going to do any of those things. So we can feel good about saying we've got a plan.
Yes, we do have a plan. What we don't have is a picture. We have a picture that's out of date. At the correct time. We got a picture that doesn't match the plan.
And didn't we just reduce it to 20,000?
That's the start.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, see where we go from there.
Are you clear on? Okay. Okay, Pam, please call the vote.
Rob,
Yes.
Michelle,
No,
Hubbard, yes, Griffin,
Yes.
Yes. Okay, motion carries 4-1. Our last new business item this evening is consideration of the acceptance of the budget document. Is there a council member that would like to move to do that?
I move to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget document as a policy document, fiscal plan and operating guide, and a communication tool that was posted on the township's website at the URL noted on page 93.
Okay, is there a second for that? Thank you, Zach. Second by Griffin. Any discussion?
I can just add that Marie worked really hard on this document, along with our intern, Ryan Bellis. He spent a lot of time working on the spreadsheets that Marie gave him. But ultimately, this is council's document that you spent a lot of work sessions working through, and gave us some numbers to put into a document that is a good communication tool and policy document. And I've believe it's still our intent to submit it to the GFOA for their best budget practices award. And that's an award that we've gotten for quite a while, and we hope to continue.
So the information contained in here, this is, as part of that new software
Mhm.
that staff has, some of this will be like populated into like a friendlier format.
Correct. Yeah. So I haven't seen exactly how that transfer happens, but I think the idea is that we take what's in our current document and basically, I don't know if it's one for one, but find a way to take what we have and replicate it in the new software.
The thing that's gonna be nice in the new software is that instead of having to update the spreadsheets every time a number changes, it will automatically do that for us. Because that's what's so very time consuming in our way that we do it right now.
So right now we have a series of Excel sheets and yeah.
I did notice on page 7, there's a picture of the twisted fish, and I have failed to mention this numerous times, but I think since it's been replaced or whatever has happened to it, I've seen it spinning, so.
I think we took it to the welder who did his best job at straightening it. And I think since it's been installed, it's kind of worked itself out.
Yeah, I've seen it spin.
So I think it's a good thing that we didn't end up replacing it.
Any other comments on the budget? Good job, Marie.
Thank you.
Please call the vote.
Michelle,
Yes.
Ara,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Keo.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business. Council comments this evening. I'll start with our 2 students. Adam, anything?
My only comment is about the ADA compliance. I think it's really good that we're working on it. One of the things that I've learned from my dad after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's is that having that compliance is incredibly important for allowing people to get around parks. And as you said, that quality of life, and it's so easy to get stuck in the house when you don't have that.
Thank you for that. Very good. Well,
Just want to say congratulations on a successful paint tester this year. You now back on the committee and had a good time in the 10 on Friday. It was nice to have everybody back and, hope we did well on paintings. I couldn't help myself. I brought one. If you haven't bought one, maybe next year. And yeah, it was a good one.
So I think that part of our goal is to post the unsold ones on the website for sale.
Thank you. Yes, congratulations. That was a lovely event. I got to participate here and there as well, and it was really nice to see the comeback for the 10th anniversary. So very well done. I'm also very happy of the discussions that we had tonight, both on the ADA and compliance and the fire station. I know the fire station conversation can take some time and some energy, and I appreciate everyone's willingness to do that.
thank you. Zach?
For our slightly tardy student representative, I want to say, don't worry, you got here at the last fire board meeting. I have a long drive from Oxford Township, which is an hour and a half on a good day. It's much longer on a bad day. The last meeting I walked in literally when they called my name for attendance. So it's just good to show up. Last council, we had talked about having mentors for our student representatives. I believe it was Ms. Hubbard and Ms. Fisher. Do you guys do anything with that?
I don't think I'm allowed to, are we really allowed to have a conversation about it right now?
Oh,
I can
okay.
talk to you about it outside of this
Yeah,
meeting. We did have a lot of discussions about it. There's a lot of nuance to it, but I'd be happy to bring it back up.
Well, I bring it up because now that we're able to meet one person, if we haven't really done that, I think it's an important thing so that they can get the most out of the experience and that we can get the most out of the experience too. My lighthearted tongue-in-cheek thing is if all we are wanting is a couple of renderings, SketchUp is a really cheap program, and you could get renderings from plans from architecture students overnight for a couple $100. They just want money for caffeine and candy sugar. Let's see.
We want more substance than that.
And I guess just a warning for everybody, apparently I got a warning here that apparently my puppy dog now knows how to pick raspberries. So if you have any raspberries anywhere near the sidewalk, pick them before you go for walks. That is it.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I haven't done in the past couple meetings. The stop signs that have been relocated, so I think there's the one at King, I think it's over the street at Lexington and Dexter and Arbor Road. That one's been placed behind the sidewalk. And then is it Fifth and Broad or? Fifth and
Sounds
Broad?
right,
I think
yeah.
that's also now it's one of the sidewalk. So I've noticed that maybe there have been others, but thanks for that.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we're back around to non-arranged participation. Anyone would like to speak? Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Joe Silicario, 3214 Boulder Court. First of all, thank you for progressing and proceeding with the plans on the fire station. Before the meeting, the one thing I wanted to come up and say, and I did say that, I got this, was make it 8 weeks, not 10 weeks, right? Because the same discussion that you had about timing, 5 weeks, that's even better. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've dealt with projects and just been frustrated on how long they've taken. I wouldn't worry so much about the dollars for the sheriff station regarding if there's an issue with the language on the bond. $1 million that you had that you're talking about isn't covered by the bond. So you have some funds to work with if you need to, if that isn't a concern. The other thing is that I encourage you not to get too many cooks in the kitchen, not to get too bogged down in the details. We're trying to get to something that you can present to you guys know all the things. You've been going through this in excruciating detail for a long, long time. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of the reason why you're here now and why we're pushing the deadlines is because you've been going through excruciating detail for a long, long time. You guys are the policymakers, you're the policy setters. You set out the policy, give the broad direction, let the people that do this every single day go off and do what they do best and come back and give you what it is that you need so that you can continue making that policy good. One other thing about Marie. Marie's been working on those budgets. They have been award-winning for, God, I don't know how long, at least 10 years, I'm sure, because it was years that I was on the council that every year we were getting those awards. One thing that gets very little attention is the property records, the tax records, the literally parcel by parcel detail on every single home, every single lot, what those are. And if you've ever talked to Marie or gone through some of those things on the what's on the tax record, there's just an incredible amount of detail. And the city faced a situation where you had one assessor that was out in Webster, one assessor that was in Scioto. They had their own way of doing things, and Marie looked at them and said, a lot of these are messed up. We got to fix these. And she's been working on that for years, going through part by part, fixing the stuff that's out there. So not only is she setting us up with the budget, making sure that the auditor is going to be in place going forward. Yeah, I have no doubt in the next couple of years, she will have the property records and the tax records in just as good shape. So she's been doing an excellent job. We see it on the board of review when we've had the discussions about how things change year to year. And there's really a lot of work that goes into that. And I don't know how much she's conveyed that to you, but there is a lot of stuff there, and it's very important. It's going to help us in the long term. So thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Is there anyone online? Anyone else in the audience want to speak? Anyone online? You can see, I don't see any hands, Josh, from here.
And then it's just Michelle Marie.
Okay. I will seek a motion for adjournment, please. Moved by Sodom, second by Jamie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Have a great 3 weeks. and enjoy Dexter.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Safe travels.